You are no longer one of us. That's what my dad said into a microphone at my graduation dinner. Not in a whisper, not in private, but in front of over 100 people, including extended family, colleagues, and university faculty. His voice echoed across the rooftop like a verdict. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I reached into my blazer pocket, pulled out a manila folder, and placed it on the table between us. Inside? Proof of a series of funding round worth $12 million, signed by 5 investors, and one name at the top, mine. That moment wasn't the end, it was the reveal. But to understand how I got there, to understand why a daughter would be disowned for choosing her own path, you need to know what came before. The expectations I shattered. The company I built in secret. And the silence I turned into strategy. From the moment I could walk, I was expected to follow in the Callahan legacy: Yale undergrad, Yale law, summer internships at the family firm, and eventually, a corner office with my last name on the door. But I never wanted a gavel in my hand. I wanted a keyboard. While other kids were reading courtroom dramas, I was reverse engineering my dad's old BlackBerry to figure out how encrypted messaging worked. My room wasn't filled with trophies or law books, it was filled with tangled wires, glowing monitors, and notebooks full of algorithms. And my dad hated it. To him, law was power, structure, respectability. Coding? It was a glorified hobby for basement dwellers. He said that once, loudly, at Thanksgiving. My mom, always the diplomat, tried to soften the blow. She's just curious, she told him. No, he replied. She's confused. They didn't see my hours of work. They didn't know I'd started learning Python at 13, that I built my first app before I turned 15, or that by the time I entered Columbia, I'd already freelanced for 3 cybersecurity startups under a fake name. To them, I was the creative one, the difficult one, the rebellious daughter who refused to follow the script. I remember one dinner when I told them I'd chosen computer science and ethics as my double major. My dad nearly choked on his wine. Ethics? What, are you planning to become a tech monk? Laughter from my uncle. Silence from my mother. I should have been used to it. But the truth is, it still hurt. The more I succeeded on my own terms, the more it felt like I was betraying their blueprint. The more I carved out a path for myself, the more they tried to convince me I was lost. So I stopped trying to explain. I stopped inviting them to demo days. I stopped emailing them updates. Instead, I focused inward. I built quietly, carefully, and consistently. While they boasted about my cousin's internships at Goldman Sachs, I was at hackathons and startup weekends, pitching to rooms full of skeptical VCs under a pseudonym. I learned how to be underestimated. And I learned how to weaponize it. They didn't see me coming. And that was exactly the point. It started with a coffee shop napkin and a conversation at 2 a.m. My roommate, Leah, was a design major with a passion for digital privacy. One night, she burst into our apartment, ranting about how her aunt's medical data had been sold to advertisers without her knowledge. I listened, then pulled out my laptop. Within an hour, we had a mock-up for what would become the first prototype of Sentinel Gate. We didn't have money, or experience, or anyone backing us, but we had anger and code. While my classmates crammed for midterms, I spent nights writing back-end systems and simulating data breach scenarios. Leah worked on UI flows and branding. We roped in a business major named Eli who was tired of pitching dating apps and finally wanted to build something with purpose. But we agreed on one thing. No one could know who I really was. I didn't want the Callahan name following me into this. I didn't want investors assuming my daddy was bankrolling it or handing me connections. I wanted every meeting, every handshake, every yes or no to come because of the work. So I scrubbed my LinkedIn, created a founder profile using just my first and middle names A. Marianne declined every invitation to startup pitch nights that might be attended by family friends. It became a secret life. By day, I was the quiet overachiever in the front row of my ethics lectures. By night, I was running simulations on a privacy firewall that could detect data leaks before they escalated. I even got a part-time job in the university's cybersecurity lab, paid just enough to cover groceries and server hosting. Leah called our tiny apartment the war bunker. We coded through finals, food poisoning, fire alarms, and one especially painful all-nighter where the entire platform crashed after a bad update, but we kept going. Then, one afternoon, everything shifted. I got an email from a woman named Natalie, Leah, partner at a small but respected angel fund in Brooklyn. She had seen an early beta we submitted to a campus innovation forum. She wanted to talk. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. I remember staring at my calendar, feeling like I was standing on the edge of two worlds. In one world, I was still Ava Callahan, daughter of Jonathan Callahan, future lawyer in their eyes. In the other, I was A. Marie, a stealth founder about to walk into her first real pitch. I told my family I was volunteering at a conference. The truth? I was walking into a room that could change everything. That night, Leah looked at me over our cluttered kitchen table. "You're going to have to tell them eventually, you know." I nodded, but not yet. Not until I had something undeniable in my hands. Not until I could put it on the table like a loaded card and say, "This is who I am." By the second semester of junior year, the pressure from home had turned into something heavier than guilt. It was surveillance. My dad began calling more often, not out of care but out of suspicion. "Still wasting your time with that computer nonsense? Have you applied to the prep program for Yale Law yet? You're not throwing away your last name, are you?" At first, I'd answer politely, then briefly. Then I stopped answering altogether. That's when the financial games began. It started with delays in tuition payments. The housing stipend slipped through the cracks. Then my meal plan inexplicably stopped working one Friday evening before finals. I spent that weekend living on stale saltines and leftover peanut butter. When I called my mom, hoping she'd step in, she just sighed and said, "Your father wants to see some commitment to the family path first." I remember standing in the rain outside the university registrar's office, heart pounding, fingers numb. I had no money left in my account, no backup. That's when I made the decision. I was done depending on them. I picked up 2 freelance contracts, small security audits for local businesses, and began pulling 20-hour weekends. Between classes, Sentinel Gates development, and consulting gigs, I barely slept. My grades dipped slightly, but the platform, it grew. By spring, we had our first real milestone, a working prototype and a beta test with 25 users. The system flagged 2 unauthorized data transfers in the first week. Natalie, the angel investor, was impressed. She introduced us to a compliance officer from a fintech startup who said, "If you can integrate this, we'll pay for it." I nearly cried after that call. Not out of relief, out of fury. How could something so real still feel invisible to the people who were supposed to know me best? My dad sent a condescending email around the same time, attached with a brochure for a legacy law fellowship. "There's still time to course correct," he wrote. "We can fix this." I didn't reply. The more I moved forward, the more he pulled back, not just financially, but emotionally. The man who used to brag about me being his brightest now barely mentioned my name at gatherings. Friends of the family told me he referred to me as the artsy one, or worse, the one we don't talk about. That stung, but it also steeled me. There's something about being underestimated for so long that transforms pain into propulsion. I wasn't going to ask for a seat at their table anymore. I was building my own. And unlike theirs, mine would have room for people who didn't need to wear the right suit or say the right thing to belong. The offer came in a plain PDF, 5 pages. Clean margins, no fanfare. Natalie's fund was offering $250,000 in seed capital for 12% equity in Sentinel Gate. It wasn't life-changing money, not yet, but it was oxygen. It meant we could finally hire a back-end engineer, pay for penetration testing, and, most importantly, stop coding out of my dorm closet. But with the offer came a question I had been dreading. "We'll need to list you as the legal CEO, Ava," Natalie said on our follow-up call. No more initials, no more aliases. If you want to raise, people need to know who you are. I froze. Coming out as a founder wasn't just about press releases and profiles. It meant inviting my father's world to collide with mine. It meant finally being seen for better or worse. That night, I sat alone on the roof of our building, the city buzzing below like a giant electric circuit. Leah joined me with 2 beers, and no judgment. I'm scared, I admitted. Not of failing of them knowing I haven't. She nodded slowly. Because then they can't pretend you're weak anymore. Exactly. My parents could dismiss me as naive, lost, even difficult but successful. That would unravel their narrative. I wasn't the daughter who failed to meet their expectations. I was the one who rejected them and built something better. I signed the documents the next morning. When I emailed Natalie the final paperwork, I included a simple line. You can list me as Ava Callahan. 3 hours later, she replied with a 1-word message. Finally. With the funds secured, we moved into a shared co-working space in Brooklyn, just 3 desks crammed between a digital therapist startup and a guy trying to disrupt cat litter. It was perfect. The momentum was real now. Sentinel Gate was live in closed beta with 100 users and early interest from 2 mid-sized insurance platforms. And still, my parents had no idea. They thought I was working retail part-time and dabbling in tech until I came to my senses. They kept sending me links to LSAT prep courses and firm internships. My dad even tried to schedule me for an informational coffee with a junior partner at Callahan Associates. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded that email to Leah with the subject line, I guess this is my formal resignation from the family empire. We laughed about it, but inside, I felt the pressure building. Something was coming, something inevitable. I could feel my father tightening his grip knot on me, but on the version of me he still wanted to believe in. And the harder he clung to that illusion, the more devastating it would be when it shattered. Graduation was approaching. I knew there would be a dinner, a speech, a reckoning, and I would be ready. The venue was extravagant, even by Callahan standards. A rooftop ballroom overlooking Manhattan, glowing with gold light and white roses. My name, Ava Callahan, was etched in cursive on a massive cake shaped like a law textbook. Everyone assumed I was headed to Yale. I hadn't corrected them. My mother wore pearls and performed elegance. My father looked like he'd just won an election-tight smile, firm handshake, fake warmth on command. All eyes were on the Callahan family, the heirs to a dynasty of legal legacy, and I was the lie holding it together. I stood quietly, sipping soda water, my manila folder tucked neatly in my clutch. I didn't plan on causing a scene. I was going to eat the overpriced scallops, smile politely, and go home. But of course, he had to make it theatrical. Near the end of the dinner, my father stood, clinked his champagne glass, and signaled for attention. I felt Leah stiffen beside me. Natalie, who had been invited last minute as my mentor, lowered her wine glass, sensing the shift. Ladies and gentlemen, my father began, his voice warm, practiced. Tonight, we celebrate a milestone, and also face a difficult truth. That caught everyone's attention. Our daughter Ava has made choices that diverge greatly from the family's values, he continued. And after many conversations, most of them painful, we've decided she will no longer be associated with the Callahan family legacy. Effective today, Ava is on her own. Gasps. A murmur of disbelief swept the room. My mother lowered her gaze, like she hadn't known. She had. She just hadn't expected he'd announce it out loud. For a second, I felt the old panic creep in. That childhood reflex to shrink, to apologize, to fix everything. But then I breathed in, and remembered who I was. I set my glass down, stood slowly, and reached for my clutch. Without a word, I pulled out the manila folder, and walked across the room to the head table. Everyone was watching. I placed the folder gently in front of my father's champagne glass, and leaned in close enough for only him to hear. You're right. I'm not part of your legacy, I whispered. I'm building mine. Then I turned around, walked back to my seat, picked up my bag and left. The air outside was cold and honest. I walked toward the elevator without looking back. Behind me, I heard someone call my name. Leah caught up with me, her heels clicking fast across the marble. "You okay?" she asked, breathless. I nodded. "What's in the folder?" she asked, half smiling. "The term sheet," I replied. "Series A, 12 million, with my name on top." We stepped into the elevator. "And the pitch deck?" she added. "Printed, annotated, bound in leather," I said. "Let him hand it to his investor friends." She laughed, but her eyes were glassy. We descended in silence, the kind of silence that follows something seismic. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed. A message from Natalie. "You didn't just take the high road, you paved your own." And then another ping, this one, a forwarded email. Subject line: Forbes Tech Request for Interview, Ava Callahan, founder of Sentinel Gate. The next morning, my phone had 47 notifications before I even got out of bed. Mentions, tags, DMs. A blurry photo of the moment I slid the folder across the table had made it onto a private Columbia alumni group, then exploded onto LinkedIn. Callahan heiress ousted at graduation dinner reveals 12M startup instead. The post had over 15,000 likes by noon. Half the internet thought I was a hero. The other half thought I was a spoiled brat staging rebellion for attention. I ignored both. I knew what that moment was, and it wasn't about an audience. It was a line drawn in bloodless silence. Around noon, my dad called. I let it ring. Then he texted, "What the hell did you give me? The press is calling me nonstop. Take it down." I didn't respond. That evening, Natalie called. "They're circling Ava. TechCrunch wants a quote. Forbes is asking for a feature. What do you want to do?" I didn't even hesitate. "We go forward." Because here's the truth. He tried to erase me from his legacy. But I had never needed his. That weekend I stayed inside. I didn't go to the co-working space. I didn't check social. I didn't even talk to Leah, who left me space like only real friends know how. Because as much as I had won something publicly, I had lost something privately. Something I hadn't even realized I still wanted. I cried once into a towel, in the shower. Not for him, for the little girl who still sometimes hoped he'd be proud. By Monday, I was back at my desk. Sentinel Gate's landing page traffic had surged 3,000%. We had over 700 new beta signups and 4 emails from potential enterprise partners. Natalie connected us with a PR consultant who coached me through what to say and, more importantly, what not to say. I kept the story simple. I'm Ava Callahan. I co-founded Sentinel Gate to protect people's personal data. The rest? That's just noise. Behind the scenes, it wasn't quiet at all. My dad's firm had released a public statement about family matters being private. But leaks trickled out about his public disowning, the dinner drama, and the fact that several private investors had pulled out of deals associated with the Callahan name due to concerns over reputation management. He was bleeding, quietly, but steadily. Then, an email came from my mother. Subject: You should be careful. Body: You've embarrassed your father, Ava. He's angry. You don't know what he's capable of when cornered. I stared at it for 5 full minutes. There was no love in those lines. Only fear. I didn't reply. Then came the breaking point. Late one evening, just as I was finishing a pitch deck update, someone rang the buzzer at our apartment. It was my father. I didn't open the door. He stood outside for over 10 minutes, pacing, then left a letter taped to the glass. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. You've made this personal. If your company damages my reputation, I will respond accordingly. No, dear Ava. No, love, Dad. Just a threat, written in fountain pen. I slid the paper into a drawer and locked it. The next day, I met Natalie at a cafe in Soho. You okay? She asked. He's unraveling, I said. She nodded slowly. Then you've already won. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like shedding something that had once been a part of me. That night, Leah and I toasted quietly with sparkling water and tacos. I was officially on Forbes' under 25 to watch list. Sentinel Gate was in talks with a regional healthcare provider for a pilot. And yet, when I looked at my reflection, I still saw that girl who used to sit at the family dinner table, praying for a father's approval that never came. But she was disappearing. Slowly, but surely. 3 weeks after the dinner, Sentinel Gate officially signed its first enterprise partnership. A mid-size healthcare provider in Oregon rolled out our software across all internal systems. It wasn't glamorous, and it definitely wasn't a unicorn story, but it was real revenue. And more importantly, it meant we were protecting actual people. I stared at the signed contract for a long time. It didn't just represent a business win. It was proof that we had built something valuable, that I had made the right call walking away, and that I didn't need the Callahan name anymore. The Forbes article dropped the next morning. The founder who quietly built a fortress, how Ava Callahan turned silence into cybersecurity. The article didn't talk about my family, much, just a single passing line. Callahan, the daughter of a prominent legal family, declined to comment on her public disowning at graduation. But that one sentence was enough. My inbox exploded. Former classmates, old professors, even an ex-boyfriend I hadn't spoken to since sophomore year all reaching out, either to congratulate me or confess they always knew I'd do something big. I ignored most of them. But one message stopped me cold. It was from my mother. Subject: I read the article. Body: you looked beautiful in the photo. I'm not writing to defend your father. I just want you to know I watched the dinner unfold, and I didn't stop him. That's my shame to carry. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. No excuses, no denial, just truth, quiet, and late. I didn't know how to respond. I still don't. But I bookmarked the email. Maybe one day. And then, just when I thought I had compartmentalized it all, I received a letter. A real one. Mailed. Handwritten. From my grandfather. He and I had never been particularly close. He was old school, stern, always more involved with my dad's career than my childhood. But somehow, the news had reached him. Ava. I've spent most of my life believing the family name was the only thing worth preserving. But perhaps, you've shown us something more important. The power of walking away from what corrupts you. I am proud of you. Even if your father never says it, I am. Granddad. I read the letter twice. Then a third time. And for the first time since the night of the dinner, I let myself feel it. Not grief. Not guilt. Relief. Because somewhere in the shadows of the Callahan name, someone had finally seen me. The next day, Leah and I met with the development team to talk growth. The pilot was working, feedback was positive, and Natalie had scheduled us for a pitch to a major venture firm in San Francisco. It felt surreal. Not because I doubted we'd get here, but because the world was finally catching up to where I'd been all along. I wasn't the prodigal daughter. I was the architect of my own future. 6 months later, I stood on stage under a spotlight, staring into a crowd of 500 investors, founders, and tech journalists. Behind me, the Sentinel Gate logo glowed on a massive screen. We had just closed our $6.5 million Series A with a leading cybersecurity venture fund. And Ava Callahan, the girl once erased from her family legacy, was now speaking as CEO of one of the most talked-about data ethics startups on the East Coast. The applause felt surreal. But not because it validated me. Because it didn't come from family. It came from something I built with my own hands, with people who chose me not out of duty, but belief. After my keynote, I stepped off stage and headed toward the private reception area, and that's when I saw him. My father. He was standing near the back of the room in a gray tailored suit, alone, no name tag, no press around him, just a man with his hands clasped too tightly behind his back. For a moment, I froze. He had no reason to be there, no business connection, no stake in the company. But, clearly, someone had forwarded the event link. And he had come. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. Because as I turned away, I caught his eyes, and for the first time in my life, they didn't hold judgment. They held recognition. I don't know if it was respect, or regret, or both. But I didn't wait to find out. I walked past him and straight toward my team. That evening, we celebrated with takeout sushi and champagne in the Sentinel Gate office, just 6 of us around a folding table with mismatched chairs and a whiteboard full of bugs. Leah raised her glass. To the legacy we choose, not the one we're handed. We clinked glasses. I smiled. There were no gold-framed family portraits on the wall, no mahogany desks, just cables, code, and purpose. And that was more than enough. The next day, I visited my grandfather. He was thinner, a little slower, but sharp as ever. He handed me a folded newspaper with my Forbes profile on the front. "You've rewritten the family name," he said. "But you haven't abandoned it. You've elevated it." I didn't know what to say, so I just sat with him. In silence. In peace. Later that night, I stood alone on the office balcony, the city stretching endlessly below me. I thought of that night on the rooftop ballroom, the manila folder, the eyes on me, the quiet walk into the elevator. That version of me had been terrified, but she had walked out anyway. And now? Now she was here. Unapologetically. Legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you decide to carry or let go. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a daughter can do is walk away from the name that tried to define her and build a new one, letter by letter, code by code, choice by choice.